about today's one, don't forget to use our official hashtags. Hashtag BJFIS 2024, hashtag chart the future, and hashtag unlocking opportunities. Whether you're posting on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn, let's share our insights and experiences with the wider community. Let's get ready for an exciting day of learning and growth. I'm sure many of you are excited to learn more about what a career as a trader is really like. You're in for a treat this afternoon. For our first breakout session, we'll be hosting a panel discussion featuring seasoned traders who will answer frequently asked questions about their roles and career paths. To kick things off and guide us through this insightful discussion, our moderator for this session is the Vice President, Senior Trader at the Treasury Group of Philippine Bank of Communications. Let's give a warm virtual welcome to Mr. Jerome Musico, CFA.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Glad that you're all here and welcome to the panel discussion on traders. We are all thrilled to have you here. I'm also thrilled to have an incredible lineup of experts with us today who will share their experiences and insights about this wonderful world we call trading. And to start it off, I'll introduce each one of them. So our first panelist is currently the head of global investments at CTS Global Equities. He has been trading the global markets for more than 15 years, primarily focusing on the US and also trading in Hong Kong, Japan, and the Philippines. He also currently serves as a board member and mentor at the Kalum Trading Institute. Let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Leonard Louis Chua, CFA. Hello, Leonard.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
And moving on, our next panelist is an alumnus of the London Business School Masters in Finance program and also a CFA charter holder. Currently, she is the head of trading operations for CTS Global Equity Group and the chief operations officer for CloudArch Ventures Group. She has a decade of experience trading global markets and started her career as a global portfolio manager at Cedarside Investments. During her collegiate years at the UP, she has bagged various championships at various competitions and likewise graduated magna cum laude. Let's give a warm welcome to Ms. Sheena Ann Lorenzo.
Hi, everyone.
And our last, but certainly not the least panelist, is the fixed income trader at China Bank Philippines. Let's also welcome Mr. Christopher Justin Mendoza. Hi, Christopher.
Hi guys.
Okay, to start things off, let's all give our delegates an idea. Let's give a background on the nature of your business or the job, particularly on the markets that you trade and the asset classes that you trade. And let's start off with giving them a typical day for you in the office, and at least give them an idea of how the life of a trader is. Let's start with Leonard, please.
Hi. So my focus is primarily on the US markets. So we do a lot of short-term trading. Typical day is we wake up, we do a lot of charting, and once we find the charts that are interesting to us, we go deep into researching the companies. By the afternoon, I meet with my team. We talk about updates on those companies that we find interesting and decide what positions to take. Since it's the US, so we have stops where we can place in our orders. So at night, once the stops are in, we tend to watch it for a few hours, maybe sometimes 30 minutes, and then hopefully the next day things are okay with our positions since we have to sleep.
Okay. How about Sheena?
Okay, so I'm also with CloudArch Ventures, but for this context, I think I'll talk more about CDS. So I'm with Leonard, but I'm head of trading operations. So on a day-to-day basis, well, for context, CDS, it's a prop trading firm. So we have more than 40 traders, and that's what they do the whole day, just to trade the market. So we have a few markets. We got the US, Hong Kong, Japan, and now the ASEAN market. So that's what we basically do. So as head of trading operations, what I do on a day-to-day is really to chase these traders chase people like Leonard, everybody on their risk and performance metrics. So that's what we do. So it's segregated on teams. So he's focused on the US, focused on the global investments, but other teams would have different strategies, other scope. Like, for example, there's an ASEAN team, there's a group of people in Hong Kong. So we closely monitor these kinds of team. So on a day-to-day basis, a lot of it is monitoring, a lot of it is a bit of corporate strategy, a bit of business development, really taking a step back. For example, in this market, okay, the fund flows are going to ASEAN, let's develop this team. So that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
And we're talking about equities here, right? I mean, the markets
All
we trade asset
equities,
class.
yeah, CDS Global Equity, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Christopher, I think you're more in the fixed income. Can you tell us
Yeah.
tell our delegates about a typical day for a fixed
Yeah,
income
sorry,
trader?
I'm just having like video problems. But yeah, I handle more fixed income for China Bank, mainly peso bonds. We handle the proprietary trading book. So main mandate is just really to generate PNL for the bank while also servicing the bank's client requirements for fixed income. So we have trust clients or even retail clients that needs bonds. We try to source it for them. So it starts basically from issuers like the government or even corporations that needs to raise funds. Aside from raising funds through loans, they can also issue bonds, which we participate in the primary market, and then we sell it to our clients through the secondary market. We can also sell the bonds to other banks, hopefully at a profit. So yeah, most of my day is just reading news from Bloomberg and following even the Fed because what happens the Fed also affects local markets significantly as well.
Right. Okay. Now that Sheena's started talking about monitoring targets, I think it's very crucial for the trading job about targets, or what we call budget, right? It's the amount of money that we traders plan to make, or if you're trading your own portfolio, the amount that you plan to make from your capital. So no need to go into the specifics about how much the budget is or whatnot, but let's give our delegates an idea at least on how should a trader think about how to attack their targets and how they're to make it if they were to be successful with it. So and particularly, how do you properly balance? I mean, it's a balancing act between risk and reward. So Sheena, since you mentioned it, can you start the discussion on that, please?
Okay, so I think as a trader, when you're balancing it out, the number one to really keep in mind, it's always on a risk reward ratio basis. So honestly, it's your call if you want to chase a more aggressive strategy, if you want to go into more speculative instruments, that's all right. But you have to make sure that the additional reward that you're supposed to get is worth the additional risk. I think that's the balance that we have in mind. So even for us, we have a lot of traders, a lot of teams with different types of strategies. There would be, for example, the other end of the spectrum. You have your scalpers. They operate on a 15-minute chart time frame, and that's all right. But they don't have overnight risk. They get out of stocks very quickly. But when you're getting out of stocks very quickly, it also means that sometimes that your upside can be quite capped. But it's very consistent. They compensate through the number of trades that they have. They have a lot and lots of trades, but each trade is very low risk with a relatively smaller reward compared to those with a longer time frame. Sometimes something happens to the company, sometimes there's good earnings, and then sometimes the stock gaps up by 50%. So a scalper might not really have that much a lot of times, but they're very controlled with their risk. So for us as a firm, we have a lot of risk alerts, risk measures based on exposure, your liquidity, based on your drawdown. So we monitor a lot of these things, but we do operate with that kind of rule. It's supposed to be commensurate to the supposed potential gain that you're going to have. It always has to be balanced. And as an overall house managing different people with these kinds of strategies, the goal for us is to have a smoother equity curve, different strategies balancing each other out. That's the general rule for us.
Okay, thank you. Leonard, if you have like...
Okay, so Sheena has a different view, no, coming from the company perspective. As a trader, basically for me, the main priority shouldn't be the target, no, it should be survival. So based on my 15 years, I never could predict what my year would be. Sometimes I'd hit the target off the chart. Sometimes I really miss the target. And what's important, because the markets are really that complex, like every year, certain strategies you think would work would do really well. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes there are things that you just fail to see, you know. And the important thing for me is that during those bad years where your system doesn't work, you live. You don't lose your account. You don't make the losses so big that it's gonna be very hard to make it back. So I think that is how I look at targets over a big picture rather than if you go every week, if you're hitting your target, it can be more stressful than reality, you know. So that's how I look at targets.
Uh, Christopher, on the fixed income side, how do you do it?
So for fixed income for the bank, like we are given targets every year. And we are given a VAR limit on depending on that budget. So typically it's half of the budget. So value at risk, you might encounter that term when you study CFA. But it basically dictates how big of a position I can take. Aside from that, we also have our stop loss limits. As Leonard mentioned, you just have to survive the year and try not to hit your stop limits. Because once those stop limits are hit, you can't trade for the whole year. Basically, as a trader, that's our rule, not to hit the stop limit. So to balance risks and rewards, like at the start of the year, I try to take small positions at first, try to build income eventually as the year progresses, as my income buffer increases, like I can take bigger positions, which would eventually let me hit my targets, hopefully closer to the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. Actually, those things are quite interesting because yeah, we do all have a figure in mind. We have metrics in mind as well. But as we all know, trading is a highly stressful job. I mean, a lot of emotions are involved. It's easy to look at numbers, but at the end of the day, honestly, even if we're talking about not our personal account or not our own money, still the idea of losing is hard to take. So my question to you guys now is that, like, how do you guys manage or how do you keep your emotions in check in order to ensure that it doesn't affect your decision making? So, Christopher, if you can continue on with the discussion.
Well, for me, like every day, like before the start of the trading, we start at 9 a.m. So at around 8:30, I set my target buy and sell levels, target volumes, and then a target position at the end of the day. And then as much as possible, like if nothing new comes out within the day, if I execute my targets for the day, I try to assess like where I went right, where I went wrong, and eventually as you grow as a trader, like you'll be able to um navigate the capital markets more easily, like once you keep learning where market moves, where the market prices in, where market speculates. If you can figure that out, you'll be eventually be a better trader. So in terms of emotions, just stick to your targets for the day and then just keep reassessing your performance.
Okay, Leonard, if you have something to add.
Yeah, it's very similar, no? I think trading is you're like it's a performance job, like you're an athlete, diba? And sometimes you're in your A game and things are doing really well. Sometimes you're not there and you can get stressed. The stress is always part and parcel of this job, because you are working in a very uncertain environment, no? So there's two things that I do. One is you need to have a hobby where you maybe lash out at that. So you have sports or any other activities. And then number two is when you're not in your A game, you go back, you really rethink what are those principles that you believe in, that you when you started you think makes sense, that you think you have an edge on, and work slowly back out from there. So
Thank you. Sheena, if you have anything to add?
Yeah, I do agree. It's a very stressful job. It's always a P&L scorecard that you're looking at. So I got two things there. So the number one is really having a good community, a good support group, because it is already a stressful job, and there would be times like in poker, it's called tilt. Sometimes your mental capability is just not there, and you go on a losing streak. And the worst thing about being on tilt is that you don't know that you're there. You don't know that there's something wrong, and it's typically the people around me pointing out people around you pointing out your blind spots, pointing out, hey, are you okay, you're on tilt, you keep on trading things that are not your typical one, so you keep on losing. So that's number one for me. And then the number two is really sticking to your objective metrics. So a lot of them, it can be frustrating, it can be emotional, so you have to stick to numbers, you have to stick to data, because data is not, it doesn't have emotions. So sticking to that kind of roots you back into the proper decision making process.
True. Agree. Okay. Now let's talk about the role that the global macro environment plays in and to how we all shape our views or how we trade. So, like particularly this current environment we are at, where as we've heard or we've known, our delegates have heard, it's been 2 years of hiking by the central banks, right? And it's just this year that we've seen central banks, I guess, with the exception of Japan and RBA, for example, begin to cut their policy rate. So I'd like to know, like, how does the macro environment help you guys shape your trading view? Or if you can be more specific, like how this current environment helps you shape your trading view for now. So Sheena, if you can start again, please.
Okay, so I think the macro environment today, I think it's as important as ever. The world is so globalized right now. Like even a Filipino investor, you go onto Interactive Brokers and you can access bonds and equities from the US, Japan, and everywhere else. So it's very easy for traders to actually switch to markets. Well, when you're a trader, when you're an investor, you always chase yields. And when the rates were at near zero, there was a lot of money out in the system trying to speculate in these kinds of stocks. But since the rates have been hiking, this money has been flocking onto the secure fixed income securities. So there's a lot more scrutiny now when they try to invest in stocks in these companies, because their criteria is getting stricter. Because a safe security is giving me 5-6%. Why would I give money to something uncertain? So this is as important as ever. So we closely monitor the fund flows. Is it the emerging markets? Is it the developed markets? This is a lot faster now, a lot faster than before. And it's so much more important now. So we take a very, very close look at macro.
Understood. Leonard, like how does it play out in your side on the global equity space?
So Sheena already gave a good overview of the things we look at. But generally, when interest rates go down, although we don't think this is going to be the same level as pre-COVID, risk taking can increase. No, so for the longest time in the US, there's been a lot of fund flows to the mega caps, and hopefully it will start trickle down to the smaller companies. No, but it'll still be very selective. And same with the emerging markets. I think interest rates also affect the dollar, the currencies, and it affects a lot of the flows. So Philippines has been on a doldrum for so long that in the equity space, but hopefully that this could provide a small tailwind towards our country.
Agree. And Christopher, on the fixed income side, how do you see it as particularly on the at least local markets?
Well, global macro is everything. Like right now that we're on an easing cycle, like volumes for fixed income, as Sheena mentioned earlier, like liquidity tends to flow back to fixed income. And the past months, we've seen daily trading volumes as high as 100 billion per day turnover. So coming from the previous years where we've only seen like 5 to 7 billion pesos a day, where liquidity is really down. So it plays a big role in trading for fixed income particularly. But yeah, at any time this could change. Inflation could pick back up. Eventually, a war could break out, or another pandemic could happen again. We just have to be quick on our feet and just keep track of global macro developments closely.
Okay. Okay, just as a wrap up on the questions I prepared, if you guys can share an unforgettable personal experience. It could either be good or bad, or both if you have, that you can share and relate on, and how it helped you guys in your trading and professional journey. Let's start with you again, Christopher, since we're here.
Okay, so as a trader, like your limits increase as you progress in your career. So when I was a junior trader, I was just trading in the regular clips of 50 to 100 million. One time, our treasurer came to the dealing room, came behind me and said, "Hey, buy 25-year bonds for 1 billion." And then a big local bank kept offering on. Eventually, like we ended up buying 5 billion at one shot. For me, like wow, that was like for one big trade, for one clip, that was a very big trade, and it was 25-year high duration, high risk trade. So from there, like I started thinking like what went to his mind that made him very confident about the trade. So I was looking more now at how the treasurer like thinks for the bank, how fixed income plays in how fixed income plays a role for the bank, for even for trust corporations, or even how the BPR and the BSP thinks, how everyone in the market thinks about the market. So that helped me in my career very much.
Thank you. Leonard, if you can share your experience.
Okay, so a lot of, for me, the formative ones are when, at least when I was younger, when you'd lose money and being able to make those back, So I think 2016, in January, I got excited about an oil idea and I lost 10% for that month. This was really very big at that time, So I was able to claw my way back in. By the end of the year, I was like up very small percentage lang naman, no? But those kinds of years for me were formative. It tells you that, you don't want that to happen again, but your ability to claw back and make strides in your returns gives you confidence in your system. So those are very important to me.
Yeah, correct. Well, it's never over until it's over for us. Sheena, if you have
Okay,
your
this is like
experiences.
2018 Pepsi. It's delisted now, so it's pretty much a way back. So that time they released earnings. I think I was also surprised with the account upgrade that time. I had quite a big account for someone young, and then the earnings were good, but apparently it's not what the market was expecting. So they just released the earnings. They were good, and the stock just kept falling off. And I was just looking at that. For context, my background, I'm a CFA. My undergrad was business, so I like numbers. I like looking at these companies. And when you're a CFA, it tells you that if the earnings are good, the stock price should be good, right? But apparently, a lot of times it's not the case, especially in the short term. So as the stock was falling, I was literally printing out the FS because I don't want to sell it. I was like, no, I'm going to look closely at this one because I think it's a good thing. And then the chairman came passing and he saw me printing it out. And then I was a bit scared because my boss was here and I'm losing money. And he just laughed at me. He said, "Naubos ka, no?" So it was a really great lesson that it teaches you. A lot of times you can be wrong, and a lot of times you really gotta trust the price. And it is what it is. You just gotta move on and accept that sometimes you are wrong. So that was very formative for me too.
That's true. It's important for us to have like a move on quickly mentality. Okay. If we have questions, we probably can take some now. Or if not, let me check the chat. Okay. Well, I have a question. If we were to say, give advice to our... okay. Here's a question here. How did you first get into trading? And do you recommend the career track for fresh graduates? Sheena, if you can start again.
Okay, so for me, I was I have the same boss as Leonard. I met him when I was 17 through these kinds of events, through these talks, because this is a good platform. So I met him when I was 17. I became his intern, and I'm still here until now. So that time when I was in school, I was thinking to myself, like, because I was studying in accounting at first, and then I was like, oh, what's better than get paid for doing this homework, for being good at this, right? So that was my mindset. And then I got addicted, I got hooked into it. So until now I'm here. So that's how I started. But a lot of people go through these internships, but it's also a nice exposure to make them understand if this is for them or for not.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how I started. What's the second part? Sorry.
So, would you recommend it for fresh graduates? Was the question.
Would you recommend it? Let me recommend. It's a very promising career, but it's not for everybody. I think everyone might agree on this one. I'm not sure if it's something we recommend though. Leonard, I don't know what you're gonna answer.
Okay, Leonard, do you have something to add there?
Uh, it's hard. That's what I gotta remind everyone. You gotta really like it. You gotta love the markets. I started as an analyst for COL, no? Then I didn't know that trading existed when I went to work. I just knew there were stocks and you analyze them. That's it. You buy, there's a fund that I didn't know there were short-term trading opportunities. That's when I was in COL, that's when I found, oh, there's another company that boss owns that does a lot of trading, and that's when it attracted my interest. No, I think you gotta love the highs and lows. It's a very different job than an analyst job. I mean, there's another track today, right, about analysts. Iba yun. I mean, it's different. I mean, it's more stable. This one is more thrill. There's more upside than downside. You gotta love the psychology aspect of markets. You gotta not just look at numbers. Uh, so if you love that kind of parang more spice to your daily life, then I
Dynamic.
think
Yeah,
trading is probably something that will attract you.
true. Christopher, do you have anything to add on is it a good advice for fresh graduates to get
Well,
a job
number
in
one,
trading?
take the CFA exam if you could. That's a big help. Like it shows how serious you are in the finance industry. But also connections like I got in treasury because of an org mate in college. Like I didn't know about fixed income much before. I only knew like trust or stock trading. But then an org mate connected me to treasury, and that's how I got in. That's basically how I started.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll just run through a little bit of the questions. I think we have questions here about people asking on what tools or skills do we have to acquire, develop if they want to be good traders at least. Do you have anything to share here, Christopher?
Just try to learn as much as you can. Like take the CFA exam. That's a big
Sure.
step. Really, like learn the basics. Um, for skills, like I think the theme earlier was like learn how to cut losses so you live to trade another day, right? So, you have to learn when you're wrong, but always be humble. Yeah, don't be too aggressive. Like the market always humbles you eventually. Like there's someone bigger out there. There's always a bigger trader. Uh, yeah, that's it.
Okay. Leonard, do you have anything to add
So in Kalo,
on?
syempre, mentioning it,
Oh
we
yeah.
talk about four pillars, no? So fundamentals, technicals, macro sentiment, and risk management, which Christopher
Mm,
mentioned, no? So it's really all those four things that I think are crucial. Some traders are very good in one, has a specialty over the rest, but you gotta have you gotta figure out what is your strengths, no? Some like for me, I like analyzing companies, and I think my view on the company helps me in my trade, no? So more than the other elements. So, but then you gotta try everything. So there was in 2016, I think we also tried night shift. We went in at 9 p.m., went home at 4 a.m., and do a lot of day trading. And then I realized it was not for me. So you got to figure out what works for you. And those skills are usually either business, macro, or chart. Those are the three skills I think are important.
All right. Sheena, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think for students, when you're trying to find out what to develop, when you want to be a professional trader, maybe three things. So number one, if you're a student, I'm assuming a lot of your business majors, pay a bit of attention in your accounting class. It's sometimes dreading to go through it, but it's very, very helpful when you're analyzing companies, makes everything a lot quicker. So your basic financial statements, that's very, very helpful. The basic, that's already good enough. And then the next one is really jumping into practice right away. Well, it's 2024. A lot of things are available online. And if you start with a small account, that's perfectly fine. You can do a paper trading account, that's also okay. But I suggest do a real account because it hurts very differently when it's real money. And I think the number three is really mental resilience. I don't know how to make you develop that, a sport or poker or anything to make you tough in your mental game, because you're gonna need a lot of that.
True. Okay, if we have a few more questions. Actually, just to add there, really is a game. So I would normally tell people like it's like you really are playing a game. So if you like to play like poker or even video games or sports, it's very competitive trading this career. So it's something that you need to have this competitive side that would make you successful in it. We have a few more interesting questions here. Wait. This one, there was a question here regarding it's actually quite related to what I was thinking about. Like, how do you guys see the future of trading? There was a question here talking about I'll just read it as is. Wait. So what's your perspective in quantitative analysis that utilize algorithmic trading? Do you see it as a threat? So actually, just to add to it, I was asking like, do you see AI or probably taking over the trading jobs in the future? We've already seen like algos coming in and black boxes working the market. So what do you guys think? Like, Sheena, what's your opinion on this one?
Okay, so for
Is
this
it
one,
is it a threat?
yeah, it's always been here. Algo traders, quant traders, they've been here for quite a while now. They just get more and more sophisticated. So we were actually trying to develop something on the side with CDS, a bit on the automation side, but it's always an argument for us. So I was just telling them this morning, I don't want to be battling against someone from Citadel, someone from Renaissance, all the best quantitative traders in the world. They got faster computers. So you got to choose your battles. If the con will always be there, and they're the best in their game, they got the best technology, so you can always choose to be in that space, or you can always choose to be in another space, which is, for example, what Leonard is doing. He's the best, and he's very good at analyzing companies. Then you can stick to that, because algo, it will always be there, but they operate on a different strategy. Some of them on a high frequency, but it's very different from, for example, a position trader, for example, someone who analyzes. Well, there's a lot of things that numbers that a lot of things computers cannot analyze. When you look at the business on the qualitative side, a lot of it, you still need a human being for that. So you can still coexist. It can be a threat if you're maybe a scalper or like a very short-term trader, but you can coexist with it.
Agree. Okay. Leonard, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I think this things really has changed the landscape, no? Even on fundamental analysis, which I do a lot of. Before, probably it was if you find a stock, you read Warren Buffett, you find a stock that's a low PE, you buy it, cigarette butt, and then it goes up. But today, the algos can find those things better than us. So certain edges are also gone. Now you have to think about, is it a good business? What are the competitive advantages of those businesses? Those things are usually harder for algos to disrupt yet. The operative word is yet. But so hopefully there's enough edge for us for now.
Okay, thank you. Christopher, on the fixed income side, do you see a lot of like this quants or AIs probably taking over like in the future?
Well, on the local market might take time because of we see it's because there's a problem of liquidity and everything. But if you could do algo, like if your system can consistently make gains, that's a good thing. You can focus on that, especially on more liquid markets, US stocks or something. But there are like jobs here in the Philippines, like that can that's still far off from that. Like fixed incomes, very hard to um do aut you can automate that especially when handling like billets and orders. So when you're talking about the balance sheet of the bank, there's still it's not short term the trading style for that. So it can coexist, yeah. And if you can focus on that, that's good. Yeah. If you can consistently make gains on that, try to do it.
Agree. Okay. We have a few more questions here. Actually, I'm just browsing through the questions. Some interesting ones here. Actually, a lot of people are asking, since I think most are students, they want to get a good starting point on the trading side. So I think the one question here was talking about did you have any like mentors, or where did you seek? Here's the actual question. So, did you have mentors? If yes, how did you find your mentors? And what advice would you give to aspiring traders seeking more guidance or more knowledge? So, again, still related to the tools or skills that we were talking about earlier. Christopher, did you have like mentors or that helped you
Actually,
in this journey?
my first boss, my first mentor was also from Ateneo. In my interview, like we just connected and like, hey, you watch basketball also? Yeah. And then like we connected right away. And then from there, like he was teaching me his style of trading. And then after that, my next boss was also from Ateneo, and like he had a different style of trading, more fundamental. And those mentors really helped me like grow in my career. They really pushed me to be better, and like they believed in me that I can handle the market and be a good trader. So having a mentor is really important.
Very helpful, yeah. Sheena, you started earlier. I think you mentioned that you were an intern. So, what did the role of having a mentor play in your journey as a trader?
It means a lot, especially when you're young. I think I was a bit more aggressive when I was younger. So I always went to these events. I really hunted for my mentors. I tried to find them. Leonard was one of my mentors when I was younger. So I think of all the interns, I go to Leonard. Leonard, do you need help looking at companies? Do you have a homework for me? I can do it for you. And then it's easier to have a feedback mechanism if you give them an output, and it's easier to see how Leonard thinks when it's some sort of a company that you're giving him. So always always be on the lookout for mentors. Always go hunting for them and try to give value to them as well. It's a two-way feedback system, and that's going to be very, very helpful because a lot of things you really don't learn inside class. So you have to really go out there, find these people, find practitioners, and learn from them. And mentorship, it's not a one-time thing. A lot of these mentors, it's forever. So it's great having these people by our side.
True. Leonard, how about your
Remember Sheena? I mean, that's very good. Like she was an intern. I mean, sometimes I go home at 6, 7. I'm like, "Diyan ka pa?" And she's always like very curious. So those are very good in learning. No, for me, mentors is definitely was very crucial. No, that's the I would say benefit of working for a company. So not only is it the elders, diba, their mentors, the veterans, but also your peers. You go figure out markets together. You're of the same experience. You talk about it, after your day. So it was very crucial. And then maybe the next step, even mentoring others, is also very important in learning further, no, what you knew. So you need to look for it if you want
yeah,
to fast track your career on that.
true. Okay, browsing through questions again. I think a lot of questions here relate to trading on a personal level. So, um it's something I'm sure we also all do aside from being professional traders. Do you guys have any advice on people that plan to trade on their personal portfolio? Leonard?
Open an account. So first, that's one. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be, you have to just start. And then there's a lot of content online. You can start looking and trying, no? So I think COL has seminars, and you can attend communities that talk about it. I used to, when I started, wala pang mga YouTube. It was to read there were a lot of readings that were needed. Today, I think there's a lot more content out there that you try to find out if it makes sense to you, and then if it makes sense, then keep trying it, no? And learn and reflect of it.
True. Sheena, do you have
Yeah.
advice for?
For me, on a personal portfolio level, it's some sort of a piggy bank also. On a most simple level, it's like your peso cost averaging, because it's our day job looking at these companies, right? So a lot of the traders, we would be trading this every day, but on the side, they usually just hold a few positions here and there, and you just put a bit of money there monthly, and after a few years, it grows. So which might sound ironic, because traders, they already do this the whole day. So usually in
Correct.
their personal portfolios, it's a buy and hold. So that's typically the case. And I don't know, I never thought I was gonna be like that, but recently I've gotten more into dividend stocks, into REITs. So I feel like my portfolio is really aging. So it's more on the conservative side now, especially in the Philippines. Well, hopefully it breaks out, because the market has been sideways for the past 10 years. So what's been working is really the buy low, sell high, the more conservative way of doing things. So that's typically what I do in the personal side.
Agree. Christopher, on the
Well,
advice for
mine's very very similar. Like you just put some money like every month or something. But I can't like actively monitor it, since we also actively trade. Uh, we monitor our own markets during the day. So when like there's just an attractive stock like with that you like, and just put money there. But it's more for holding, not actively trading, like not for short term trading. Yeah.
agree, actually. So there, if you were to plan to trade personally, if you are a professional trader, I agree with them that you won't have a lot of time trading personally. I think we have to wrap up in a bit. So if you have like a few parting words for our delegates here, Christopher, just a few things that you can leave the session with.
If when you go into trading, just try apply. Like there are a lot of openings for junior traders. A lot of banks they have open positions. So just show in your resume that you want the job, and show that you're willing to do the extra work, the extra research. You're willing to learn, and look for a good mentor if you have options. Yeah.
Okay, Leonard.
Yeah. Markets it's a very interesting place for me. There's a lot of stress, but there's a lot of reward also. And if you find joy in it, you should just start early. Don't be afraid. It can be overwhelming at first. There's a lot of things that you don't know, and that's fine. No, sometimes we get overwhelmed, and you learn through pain, through sometimes a start, but eventually the rewards will bear fruit. You have to believe in it. So start early.
Thank you, Sheena.
Yeah, for me, I think step one is to really understand yourself if it's something that you want. When I was in college, after my internship with Larry, I had 3 more finance internships. I had to check if it's really what I wanted. But I came back here and I always told myself, we got a chairman that time, he was 60. When you're 6 years old and you're still that passionate about your job, when your eyes are still sparkling, then it must be the right industry that you're in, right? So that's number one. And then the second one, once you decide if this is for you, understand that it's not an industry of mediocrity. It's very difficult to be mediocre here. If you're not winning, you're losing. So you gotta hunt, you gotta put your best, because it's a very competitive game. So you gotta give it your all. That's the second one.
I agree. Thank you, guys. With that, I think it's time to wrap up, and thank you guys for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leonard Chua, CFA, Mr. Christopher Mendoza, CFA, and Ms. Sheena Lorenzo, CFA, and Mr. Jerome Musico, CFA. As our token of appreciation, we present to you the e-certificates. CFA Society Philippines presents this Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Leonard Chua, CFA, for his valuable contribution as the panelist on the topic of Trader Track at the Philippine Junior Finance and Investment Summit 2024. Chart the future, unlocking opportunities for tomorrow. Given this 27th day of September 2024. Signed by Mr. John B. Basa, CFA, the President and Chairman of the Board of the CFA Society Philippines. Next, we also present the Certificate of Recognition to Ms. Sheena Lorenzo, CFA, for her valuable contribution as the panelist on the topic of Trader Track at the Philippine Junior Finance and Investment Summit 2024. Chart the future, unlocking opportunities for tomorrow. And also, we present the Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Christopher Mendoza, CFA, for his valuable contribution as the panelist also on the topic of Trader Track at the Philippine Junior Finance and Investment Summit 2024. And finally, we also present the Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Jerome Musico, CFA, for his valuable contribution as the moderator on the topic of Trader Track. Now, may we please call on the panelists and our moderator again for a quick photo op. One, two, three. Our sincerest appreciation for your time and effort for being here today. God bless and keep safe. All right, we'll take a quick 5-minute break to stretch, grab some coffee, or just refresh before diving into the second and last session for the Trader Career Track. If you want to post about PJFIS 2024, do not forget to use the hashtags #PJFIS 2024, #Chart the Future, and #Unlocking the Opportunities. Also, a quick reminder that the evaluation form is available in the Zoom plenary. Completing this is part of the requirement to receive your e-certificate, so be sure to fill it out later. Welcome back, everyone. We've had an incredible day so far, and now we're down to the final session of the trader career track. But don't worry, we're ending on a high note. Up next is a must attend session entitled Executing the Trade Best Practices and Common Mistakes. This session will cover everything you need to know about executing trades effectively, highlighting best practices, common pitfalls to avoid, and insights from an industry expert. So get ready for a powerful session packed with knowledge and strategies that you can apply in your own career. Our speaker is the head of trading and dealing at Call Financial Group Incorporated. Let's give a virtual round of applause for Mr. Perry Irvin Ang, CFA.
Hi, good afternoon. Yeah, I'll just share my slides. Yeah. So, hi guys. Welcome to today's talk for executing the trade, best practices and common mistakes. So, I just probably start by sharing a bit of something about myself. So I'm currently the head of trading and dealing at Call Financial. I graduated from the Ateneo with the management engineering course. I also took a master's in data science from the Asian Institute of Management. Then aside from being a CFA charter holder, I also took the CMT charter. So I just shared here some tidbits about me. And if you notice here, I took quite a lot of certifications and the certifications and masters and everything. But I took this throughout the years, and I just wanted to share here that this is not overnight thing naman. You can just try to see what you want to learn as you progress in your career, because in college it's really learning all about the general stuff. So you don't really deep dive into anything in particular. So when I graduated and I said, okay, I really am interested in the financial markets. I like in the numbers, finance, and the stuff. I went into looking at CFA, doing CMT, and even the data science part. I took it because I said, oh, quantitative finance is coming up, AI and the like. Let's just try to get in and see what happens there, and try to apply all of these things and see where it goes. So it's just a quick advice for since I heard the last part of the previous session, you were asking for career advice and whatnot. So that's just a little bit about me. So now let's jump right in to the topic for today, executing the trade. This is actually kind of a difficult topic to share because I know when you come here today, you might be looking for something like, how do I make good trades? Like the previous speakers, they shared how they execute buy sales to go into to try to hit their targets from a professional trade perspective. But so actually, the first question that I want to clarify is, what kind of trade are we talking about? And there are different kinds of trades, and I put here personal trading versus institutional trading, and that's because that's the more common thing to know. Like if you're trading personally, I see a lot of people in the chat, like let's say Nathaniel Rex asking who are trading in Forex here. So I'm presuming that you're trading for personal, or maybe some of you are trading for prop firms. But I guess personal trading is more accessible to everyone at this stage. So that's why I put in personal versus institutional trading. And can I just get a quick show of hands, like how many are trading here? Maybe you can, is the raise hand function working here, or just so I have a view on the current audience. So I see some raising their hands. So yeah, so I guess there are a lot of people in this room that are trading for their personal portfolios. And that's why maybe you're interested in this topic. So what I can share is that in the difference between, let's say, personal trading and institutional trading, I guess it just boils down to two differences. Like if I want to like simplify things, no, it's going to be the size. Usually personal trading, you have smaller and fewer orders, like maybe you're trading 10,000, 100,000, 1 million, then you're looking at 1, 2, 3 lines, or 1, 2, 3 types of orders. But in institutional trading, you generally have larger and more orders, like you're trading millions, billions, and you're trading like 10, 20, 30 names in a day, like that. So the reason why I put in generally is because syempre, there are also people who are personal, like trading for their personal portfolios and the like, but they're moving like institutional. They're large, they have more, they have a lot of orders. Yeah. And likewise, there are also institutional traders who have, you know, trading in a personal capacity also, like smaller and fewer. Basically, the type of trades that they do are smaller and fewer. So but in general, those are the differences. And what I want to discuss today is actually on the institutional side. Currently, I'm the head of trading and dealing of COL Financial, but that's for the institutional business. And I guess a quick difference for that is, okay, let's jump to the next part so we can discuss more about it. But hold on. So for institutional trading, you probably have different asset classes. Like in the previous one, you have stocks and equities from CTS Global, and you have fixed income from Christopher. Actually, are they still here? Because Christopher is actually my batchmate. So shout out to Christopher. And Leonard was also my former manager. I also interned at CTS before. So happy to see everyone in this talk. So, but so there are different asset classes: stocks, equities, fixed income, FX. There are also others like derivatives, options, swaps, crypto, but these are the main asset classes. And for each of these asset classes, you can segregate them into two: buy side and sell side. So quick difference is that my next slide? Yeah, okay. I'll discuss more about buy side and sell side later, but because maybe that will confuse more of you, like you don't know which one, what's the difference. But for me in COL, I'm focused on stocks and I'm on the sell side. So this is what we'll focus on today. I guess my goal will be to share what it's like in the sell side for stocks, and particularly institutional trading, and see, and maybe by sharing, you'll know if this is something that interests you and something that you want to pursue as a career. So the main difference is for buy side, the role of buy side participants are to make investment decisions for their clients. So it just depends on what kind of clients you have, but most of the time, you are managing funds. Let's say if you have a mutual fund or if you have trust accounts, or if you go to similar to CTS or the previous speakers, they have their own PNL, they have their own trading book. That's also, I would consider that as buy side also. And usually you have a goal, and your goal is if you're handling equities, you probably have a benchmark that is the PSEI or the Philippine Exchange Index, top 30 names. The targets that were mentioned a while ago, that's their goal also. That's their benchmark if they have an absolute return target for the firm. So buy side, thinks about what they want to trade, what they want to buy, what positions they want to enter into, what positions they want to close today, or in general, that's the case. But the sell side is actually the one that executes for the buy side clients. So usually, if you are trading personally, if you have a personal account, if you're trading stocks, technically you're in the buy side. You're making the investment decisions. And how do you execute those trades? It's actually, if I don't know, if you have a COL account, you log into your COL account and enter the stock you want to buy or sell. And then technically, that's how you execute the trade. And the difference lang is the sell side client at the sell side firm in that case is COL, but you're the one who basically you told COL that you want to buy this stock, this number of shares, this price, but you entered it in the system. So it gets executed directly to the exchange, to the market. So that's what we call a DMA, direct market access. So clients can have direct market access and execute their trades however they want, but you still have to have a broker. Whatever firm that you open an account with, that's the broker that executed your trade. Even though you're the one who inputted the order. But in this case, in our case, in institutional trading, our clients are mostly the banks, the insurance companies, the government agencies, and whatnot. They have bigger portfolios. They have billions in assets, some even trillions. Usually, they don't have the time to execute their orders themselves because, syempre, if you have, let's say, 1 billion of stock to sell or kahit na 100 million yan, you won't be able to sell 100 million or buy 100 million worth in just one go. Usually the difference between personal, if we go back a few slides back, the difference between personal and institutional is if you're personal trading, usually you can enter positions and exit positions very quick. Like you want to buy into this position, you look at the, let's say, 15-minute chart, one hour chart, pick your spot, enter, set your stop loss, target price, and then yun, you can work around that model. So you have one entry price, or maybe you can tranche it in 3 times, 3 entry points, but you can complete your position with ease. Usually that's the difference. In institutional trading, if you're gonna execute 100 million worth, even if it's an index stock like SM Prime, it's difficult to execute 100 million worth in one go without moving the prices too much and everything. You'll have bad price if you try to get all the shares immediately. So usually what you do, you execute it throughout the day. Get 100 million in from 9:30 to 3, that's maybe 4 hours plus of trading. So if you do that, you can do it 25 million per hour, then subdivide that into per 10 minutes. So at least it becomes more manageable. Na parang, kaya I need just to execute 3 to 5 million every few minutes. Then that makes it more parang it can more easily be absorbed by the market. So since that's how usual institutions operate, they need someone to execute the trade for them, and that's where we come in, our team. So usually you'll get orders for clients, and clients will ask you to buy stocks, sell stocks, because I'm in equity side, right? So presentation will focus on sell side and equities. Okay, so basically our role is to execute the trades for clients, but our goal essentially is to help the buy side clients in whatever way possible. We give them trade ideas, we match their flows, execute their trade, etc. So the more helpful you are to your client, of course, the more tendency that, or the more incentive they will have to trade with you. Parang, oh, I want to trade with this guy because I get more value add, etc., etc. And syempre, if there are 100 brokers out there, why will a client give the order to COL and not to a different broker? Kasi syempre, if both can execute in the same way, then it's like the same same lang. So parang there's no difference. So usually the difference is in trade ideas. Baka right now we're looking at this stock, this name, because of this. And then every time you pitch those ideas, it really outperforms over the next 3 to 6 months. Ganyan. Then maybe that's plus points to the clients. So I don't know if this is enough to clarify buy side and sell side, but this is where we are now, and we can proceed next to I guess the best practices and common mistakes. Yeah, okay. So in institutional trading, as I mentioned a while ago, the orders are usually large, and usually you work them over the day. Like you execute the whole order throughout the day, I mean, sometimes throughout the week or throughout the month, because they're really large and you don't want to, you know, move the market too much just because you have an order like that. And so that's why the first best practice that I can share is maybe I'll just the way these best practices are lined up is just to give you an idea how institutions trade. So usually it's best practice to look for matches prior to executing on the board. So let's say I want to buy a stock worth 100 million. Instead of giving the order to me, let's say I give the order to Perry, or buy 100 million of this stock. I look around first, ask around and see, oh, I'm looking to buy 100 million worth of this stock. Can you look for a seller? Oh, baka may selling sa kabilang bank, ibang broker, ganyan. Kasi if you're able to find a seller and a buyer, 100 million sila parehas, you just have to cross them together and done na sila. And these are win-win for both buyer and seller, because you don't need to execute the 100 million throughout the day and risk na, okay, I might buy low or sell, I might buy high and sell low, like that. So it's more of like, okay, match na tayo, we just agree on the price, and that's it. So that's, if you're trading Philippine market, you'll probably see a lot of crosses, occasionally, especially on the index names. That's probably be two clients being matched, and that's win-win because they are able to complete their orders with minimal impact to the market price. So that's the first ideal way to, execute your orders. But mahirap din maghanap ng match. Like it's difficult to find the counterparty because you need to both agree on the terms, like do we match it at price? Do we match it at VWAP? Do we match it like that? So syempre, if you're seller, you want to sell it higher. If you're buyer, you want to sell it lower. So if you cannot agree or you cannot negotiate and come up with a deal, then you have to work on the board. You have to, okay, sige, let's buy the 100 million worth of this stock on the board. So we have to buy, post bids, buy the ask, etc., etc. But I guess the best practice to share here is that you want to try to minimize the price impact when working on the board. We have to be aware of how your order is affecting the market prices, kasi if we know from basic economics, supply and demand affects prices. So if you're buying 100 million worth and you're suddenly putting a lot of demand and people see that there's suddenly a lot more demand now than a while ago, prices will go up kasi sellers will try to, sell higher, ganyan. So, trading is similar to negotiating sa mga vendors, di ba? Sa Divisoria. You usually see bids and asks. Okay, if I take this ask, the seller will say, oh, baka he can buy me higher. I'll try to post higher. But if you want to try to negotiate lower, okay, I don't buy you up first. See if they will sell you down. So most of the time it's negotiations game, because everyone you see on the bid ask are live traders, especially in the Philippines kasi wala pa tayo masyadong algo and everything. So usually it's really a negotiations game, and you don't wanna, if kasi the usual, well, later on that's the common mistake, but let's say when I'm new to this job, first time to get 100 million order, wow, ang laki. 100 million. Saan ako kukuha ng 100 million pambili? Pero hirap nito bilhin. So let's say let's buy up, and then later on you realize after you finish your order, get sold down again. And then you get your client's not happy with you. Why did you buy at all these high prices when you could have gotten it lower? But of course, for my mindset before, how can I get 100 million worth at this price? So it's more of like you have to balance out completing the order and the price. So here I can share that usually in institutional trading, especially in the sell side, your benchmark is VWAP. Okay, let's go back a few slides a bit. Here. Diba, I mentioned a while ago, buy side, usually the goal is to outperform a benchmark, whether it's an index, it's an absolute return target, etc. That's the benchmark. And if we drill down on the sell side, especially on the trade execution, usually the goal is to beat VWAP. Kasi, okay, VWAP is, I don't have it in my slide kasi, but it's a volume weighted average price. I'm sure some of you may have heard it already. And the reason why that's the benchmark is because volume weighted average price is just the average price of a stock throughout the whole day. So kaya assuming there's a 1 billion worth traded today in terms of value turnover, and let's say there's 100 million shares traded, it means 1 billion divided by 100 million, the VWAP is 10 pesos. It means throughout the day, if you took the value traded and the volume traded, the average price is 10 pesos. So if I'm buying today and I was able to buy something like less than 10 pesos on average, kaya 9.5 yung nabay na average natin, then it means you outperformed VWAP. Kasi the ideal is parang you were able to buy at all the prices that the market was able to execute on, proportionally the same, ganyan. And if you were able to do that, 10 pesos yung average mo. But if you were able to get it lower, then it means it was better to have traded with you than trade VWAP. Similarly on the sell, if you're selling, if the client gives you a sell order, you have to be higher than the VWAP. Like if the VWAP is 10 pesos and you're able to sell at 10.5, so that's good. So basically, if we're just looking at the goal of trade execution, our goal as traders executing for clients on a day-to-day basis is to try to at least be in line or be better than VWAP for the day. So and the reason why I share that is because this is in line with trying to minimize the price impact. Kasi if your order is affecting the market price a lot, it means that you don't know. Kasi you should know that if the seller is bigger than you or not. If you have 100 million buy, but someone out there has 500 million selling, even if you complete your 100 million buy, later on, stock will be sold down. Kasi there's someone with a bigger order. So you cannot assume that, oh, okay, I have 100 million order. Oh, I'm very big. I can move the price and the price will close high like that. So therefore, usually that's the reason why you're buying up a stock, diba? Especially if in your similar to your personal trades din. If you think the stock will break out already, or if you're trading crypto or FX, oh, mag-break out na, let's buy it na. Kasi if you buy it now and then it breaks out, we make money. It's a similar scenario in institutional trading. If you have an order and you're buying also, oh, I'll buy it here na kasi if I don't buy it and somebody else buys it, I will have to buy higher. So I can buy everything here, and then if it closes high, I beat VWAP. Kasi I was able to buy everything below and then prices close high. But in doing so, and you didn't realize na prices were moving higher because of you were buying, and then when you finished buying, prices sold down kasi the seller was there all the time, but they were trying to, sell as high as they can and see. Basically, they were trying to gauge if they are bigger than the buyer. So in that case, they were able to minimize their price impact kasi they have a 500 million selling, but they're letting price go up. So that's just an example of why this is a best practice. And you'll probably learn more if ever you pursue this career, no? Yeah, and the last that I can share is you can align the priorities. Usually there are two trade-offs in the institutional business. Do you want completion or do you want price? Because it's difficult to get both. Completion means, if I have 100 million buying today, do I want my 100 million today? Or do I want 100 million only if the price is at this level? So if it's in the latter, then it means you're prioritizing price. You want the share at certain price levels. If you're at the first, parang kahit ano pang mangyari, I need 100 million worth of this stock today, then your priority is completion. Then it means you have different orders that you can give to your broker to execute that trade. So I can just share maybe the common order types that you can get. Usually, the first is careful discretion. Careful discretion, itaga, buy ako 100 million CD. Ibig sabihin, ikaw na bahala. Basta, wag mo, basically, the CD order, you have a benchmark, that's VWAP. Kasi basically, since careful discretion, how will the client know that you were careful with their order? They will compare what you got, the average price you got for them versus their VWAP of the market. So if those are better or worse, then yun yung magiging gauge on how well you've done as an executing broker. So usually, careful discretion, there's no limit. As long as you get the 100 million worth of stock for that day, then it's a must complete order. Ganun. Then if you don't want naman to complete and your priority is more of price, usually give a limit or better order. So you usually say, okay, buy 100 million worth at 100 pesos or better. So it means 100 pesos or lower. Kasi if you're buying, the lower, the better. So they can give that kind of order. But if the stock never hits 100, kaya it was trading 102, 103, tapos it never hit 100, then you won't be, there's no guarantee that you'll get your 100 million worth of stock that day. So this is mostly for clients who, who want to get better prices. The last two are also common. Market on close is basically you buy 100 million worth of stock at the close. So in the Philippines, you have an auction period for stock. So you can just post at the ceiling and you get the price, closing price for the day, and for your whole order na 100 million. The other counterpart is a limit on close. I want to buy 100 million pero put a limit. Don't put the ceiling or don't get the closing price if it's higher than my limit. So again, completion is more for the market on close, MOC. Then if you're more price sensitive, parang if your priority is more on getting a better price, you can put a limit on the close. So usually these are the best practices. There are a lot more, but this I when I was doing the slides, is more on trying to give an overview of how institutional trading works so that you'll have an idea on whether this interests you or not. So we can discuss it next time if you decide to come join institutional trading industry. So moving on is the common mistakes. A lot of the best practices and common mistakes actually are applicable to both personal and institutional trading naman. But for institutional trading, I can share maybe the common mistakes that are here are mostly for when you're executing on the board. So for when you're executing on the board, usually if you have, let's say, going back to the example, if you have 100 million buy order, one common mistake is to hold the line. So usually you can post bids. You're posted on the bid side. You're posted on the second best bid, third best bid. Basically you padded the bid side already. So you have to just be aware on how your orders or how your postings are affecting the market, because sometimes just by posting your bids, you're holding the market current levels because a seller doesn't want to, kasi a while ago we shared that the best practice is minimize price impact. So it means the seller doesn't want to sell down all the bids kasi that will affect market prices. Parang they don't want to be the one to drive the price down when seems like there's demand naman. So sometimes, because of that dynamic, you're holding the line. If you just cancel all your orders and see, most likely the price will go lower because you remove the demand on the board. So this is one of my common mistakes also when I was my early days trading, putting the bids, because usually you just follow some if you remember, I mentioned a while ago that you usually spread out the order throughout the day for institutional trades. Then it means usually you have an estimate. Okay, this order, it's already, let's say, close to lunchtime. I need to have at least 40 to 50% of my order na. Because that's how you spread your order throughout the day. So if by lunchtime hirap ka pa kumuha ng kaya if you have 100 million order and you haven't executed, you just executed 10 million, it means dapat nasa 30 to 40 million ka na, but you're at 10 million pa lang. You have the tendency to put all the bids there just in case may mag-sell down. If somebody sells it down, then okay, I get my shares, ganyan. So but that action actually holds the line, meaning it supports the price. You support the price, and that's not reflective of what the market price will really be. So just have to be mindful of that. And of course, the other side naman is you're hesitating naman to pull the trigger. This is the same lang din personal trading, psychology wise and everything. This usually happens if this mostly happens in, let's say, if you have a CD order, the careful discretion order, because careful discretion, you don't have a limit. But let's say, assuming the price is currently below 100 and there's a big chunk of shares at 100, you don't want to buy 100 pesos kasi that's the high of the day. There are a lot of sellers there. But you lack shares. Kaya assuming a while ago, I need to probably have 30 to 40 million worth already by this time. I only have 20 million. I need to catch up somewhere. I'm staying on the bids. If somebody else takes the whole 100 peso, all the shares in 100 peso level, then I will be forced to take above 100. So sometimes, because you hesitate, kasi syempre, I don't know if you can imagine the hesitation. It's because 100 pesos has never been broken. So it's never traded above 100 pesos. And if you buy at 100 and it goes down, you'll feel like, oh, sayang, I should have waited na lang. Personal trades. So usually the way to counter this type of hesitation is to really have a plan. Like throughout the day, okay, if this happens, I do this. If this doesn't happen, I do this. Basically, you don't predict the market na. Kasi if you don't buy certain price levels, you have inherent it's like you are assuming that the market price will be this or that. That's the inherent assumption based on your action. So if you don't pull the trigger, you don't buy 100, it means you're implicitly saying na it wouldn't break above 100. So, but then we don't know. We can never really tell where the market is headed. So it means you have to have plan A, plan B. Okay, if 100 gets taken, what will I do? If it doesn't get taken, what will I do? Etc. And if you have those plans in place, everything will be crystal clear. How you execute the order, kasi you covered all your bases eh. If and then, dalawa lang naman. If the market goes up, market goes down. The prices go up, prices go down. Prices go up and there's a lot of volume. Prices go down with a lot of volume. So those scenarios are, should be running through your head as you trade the whole day. And if you have that kind of plan and you know what to do in every scenario, you won't be surprised. You won't get surprised by the market. Say you only get surprised if it runs counter to your expectations. And usually expectations are what will drive the common mistakes eh. Na parang having an expectation means that you are forecasting the market price to do something when it's really not. It's really difficult to forecast market prices. Kasi if it's easy to forecast market prices, then someone would have cracked the code. There would have been someone that's very, very profitable every year, year in, year out, and everything. So since there's really no one as consistent as that, it means you really cannot put, weight, a lot of weight into saying, okay, I have high conviction, especially say if we do institutional trading, if you notice that the benchmark is VWAP, it's similar to day trading. You're looking at prices throughout the day rather than over a longer time frame. So in the short term, it's really more difficult to even forecast prices. So lastly, it's also letting your emotions get to you. So this is, I think, a while ago, the speaker, Sheena, mentioned that you probably feel tilted if there are a lot of, you have a lot of losing trades. Ganyan. This is also the same then in institutional trading. Sometimes if you have a buy order and you and me, let's say I bought the 100 pesos na high, and then it really goes down. Then I say, sayang, I should have waited na lang. It will go down din naman. So that might, change your psychology and change how you trade the whole day. And one way I try to combat emotions is, just treat your orders as several small orders. So kaya if I bought at the high for, let's say, this specific time, then for that number of shares, you lose against VWAP. But don't let that number of shares ruin your whole trade. So kaya if you bought 5 million worth at 100 and the VWAP at the end of the day was 99, 5 million lang yung talo. Your 95 million can still beat VWAP or be in line with VWAP. So you don't have to let that 5 million ruin your 100 million trade. So that's how I view emotions, no. And if you're able to master controlling the emotions, having clarity of thought, planning out your trades, etc., then it would be easier to survive in this career. So after all this sharing, I don't know if this is the career that interests you or not, but I'm just showing this. There's this other side of the fence, supposed to say, because versus, let's say, trading for CTS, or if you're a proprietary trader, you're doing the investment decisions yourself for personal trades, etc. This one is more like you're executing trades for clients, particularly the big clients, institutional clients. And so it's a different world then. Before, I also have more than a decade of experience trading. And before, I was only exposed to that side, trading personally, charting, stop loss, target, etc. I've just been in this role for the past 2 years. So in the last 2 years, I learned a lot. There's a lot. There's a whole new world out here for institutional clients, institutional trading, execution, etc. So what I can share with you is that in institutional trading, and actually I don't know if I can if I can say this also for the others, say for sila Leonard, sila Sheena, it's mostly trading is mostly flat in terms of hierarchy. But every day is a new day. That's what I can share. Kasi on paper, if you are going to read a job description of a trader, especially in the institutional trading role, you're just executing trades every day. Your goal or your role is your job description, execute trades for clients as the main role, and then maybe research and other stuff on the side. Then it might sound repetitive, but ironically, it's never repetitive. I'm sure people who have started trading here or have experienced trading markets, whether stocks, forex, crypto, etc., you know that no two trading days are the same. And the difference there is market participants are not the same every day. Sometimes iba-iba yung tao. So since markets are driven by humans, there will be no two trading days that are the same. So even if you're executing trades the same, every day executing trades, the way you execute the trades will differ every day. And the challenge, especially for me, is how do I complete my clients' orders at the best prices possible? How do I ensure that my execution is, the best execution that they can get in an ever-changing market environment? So for me, it's very challenging that way. And I don't find it, personally, I don't find it boring just executing trades every day because of this dynamic. Kasi I really want to get the best prices for the clients. I really want to execute and complete their orders in the best way possible. And studying how the markets work. Okay, kasi you have to study how the markets work, how prices move, fluctuate throughout the day, in order for you to get those prices for the client. So if this sounds challenging or, this challenge sounds exciting to you, then I guess you can consider a career in institutional trading on the sell side. It's really just you against the market because there's minimal politics because your work speaks for itself. If you can beat VWAP every day, every time you give an order to this trader, the trader executes it perfectly, like, syempre, perfect in the sense na, lahat napag-isipan, okay, if natalo man, it's because the market really, how can you forecast that there was a MOC up 3% in the end of the day? Ganyan. So, flat hierarchy and seniority comes with experience. As you get more experience, more years of experience, you become more senior as a trader. You get to build your credibility and everything. So I guess I was able to share. I hope I was able to share something about this role, and I'm happy to get questions. And feel free to connect if you have more questions also.
Thank you, Mr. Perry Ang, for that insightful session. Now, to moderate the Q&A portion, may we please call on Mr. Emmanuel Bertodazo Jr., CFA, an interest rates derivatives trader for Security Bank. The floor is yours, Mr. Bertodazo.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Sorry, thanks to, yeah, there we go. Thank you for that wonderful topic, Sir Perry. So, guys, the floor is open for some Q&A. If you guys have any question for Sir Perry here, please go ahead. Okay, so we have one here, Sir Perry, from Miss Jessica. So, from Miss Jessica, what are some of the more rewarding aspects of working in an institutional trading than personal trading?
Good question. I think the more rewarding aspect for me is kasi I don't know about you guys, but let's say for me, it's difficult to get my personal account to the same size as an institutional client, diba? When will we ever have the opportunity to execute 100 million pesos worth of buy or sell order in a single day? So parang if you're able to handle 100 million worth of order on a day-to-day basis, and you're able to beat VWAP and everything. It's like I let's say prior to this role, I would never have imagined being able to execute orders that are that size at a good price. Sometimes you're able to execute 100 million worth at very low prices, very good prices. When if you're trading personal, actually before if I started trading, I was also a student. Said, oh, kung makaabot lang ng 1 million peso account, oh, that will be very big na for me. And I was imagining, oh, 1 million pesos, how will I buy 1 million pesos? I will need to buy a few flocks up na, ganyan. So parang, if nalalakihan ako sa 1 million dati, what more if you get 100 million? And 100 million is not even the largest. You can get a billion of ordering. And so parang, I guess that's rewarding for me that you're able to execute large size orders efficiently.
All right. Thank you there, Sir Perry. So we have another question, sir. But I'm not sure if this is the most appropriate one. Mr. Lian is asking about a concept called smart money concept. If you're familiar with there, Sir Perry.
Yeah. We've heard smart money where basically institutional investors are accumulating, and I think this is also heavily followed in, let's say, crypto space, the whales, etc. So I think if the question is if the approach is reasonable, it is reasonable. But the question is, how do you track the footprints? Kasi you can think that, oh, this institutional, there's this someone accumulating, when in fact they're not. There's no way to verify. It's difficult to verify unless you have, connections with the institution itself. So parang, if you're able to verify, then it's a reasonable approach to trading. But my question is, how do you do that consistently and accurately?
Yes, sir. Correct. And if to say, sir, technically you are one of the institutional traders, so to speak. I mean, one of the smart money, so to speak. From a question from Mr. Lian. So it's yeah. So for that, Mr. Lian, as Sir Perez mentioned, it's quite reasonable, but really hard concept to sort of do it in a consistent manner. And so here we have a third one. On your personal opinion, sir, which do you think, what type of trading do you think is best for learning for younger professionals or students, such as those watching us right now?
Okay, before jumping to Nathaniel Rex's question, I'll just add a bit also in Lian's, no? Kasi, of course, we are currently in the institutional trading side, right? And obviously we have visibility, or we know client orders and everything. But it's really important that if you go to this institutional trading side, that you practice good ethics and everything. As a CFA, that's what we all learn. Ethics is number one. And basically, we cannot, you cannot trade on client information and everything. Actually, we are not able to, you should not actually have it's difficult to have a personal portfolio if you are in an institutional trading, because this is all about the relationship game. It's a trust business. If your clients think that you're front running their trades and everything, why would they give you the order? You have to
Right.
be very transparent and very highly, you have to have integrity in this business. Actually, this goes for all, especially if you're in the finance industry. Your name and your reputation, it's really 80%, 90% even. If you have very good skills, very everything, you're good at everything, but your character is in question, it's difficult to make it in this industry. So
Right, sir.
with that, question from Nathaniel. which type of trading? I guess one way I can put it is I think it's easier for you to get into institutional trading if you have some personal trading experience. Kasi if you notice what I shared a while ago, the difference between personal investing or personal trading versus institutional trading, it's mostly the size. So if you're not able to execute personal trades, it's gonna be difficult to jump straight to executing institutional trades. So by having an idea on how the markets work and how trading works on a personal level, it will be easier for you to enter into an institutional trading career, I think. But if you have enough interest and if you really, if this is something that really piques your interest, then I think there's no harm trying to go straight for the institutional career role, because if they're gonna accept you, they'll train you. And if they train you, then you can skip the personal trading side. I guess those are two options.
All right, Sir Perry, thank you so much for that for the answer to that question. So guys, we have a couple more minutes for Sir Perry here. If you guys have any more questions, just feel free to put in the message or DM me directly. Yeah. So I think, sir, as of now, the audience is satisfied with the questions given. Yeah, but sir, before we end, can you do you think any advice to the those looking to starting into say institutional trading? Is there anything that maybe a book, a YouTube video or something that they can start looking into or start studying in order to get into this institutional trading side of the financial markets?
Yeah, maybe it's really maybe read up on I don't know, you can actually watch or read articles on institutional trading. Let's say, I think there's a series now also on this, but I haven't watched it.
Is
It's
that is
called
that built
Industry.
industry? Yeah, yeah. It's a
Industry,
good
Industry.
series. Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
good,
but
yeah. So, pero medyo ano yun, medyo
exactly,
rated R daw eh.
exactly. So,
Pero if you cut out
Mhm.
the R
Yeah. I
rating,
I
that's
yeah, yeah,
similar to how institutional trading,
yeah, yeah.
minus all the drugs and everything like that.
I agree.
Uh kasi I think the main barrier to the institutional trading as a career is understanding how it works. Kasi if
Definitely.
you don't understand how it works, you won't know that it's something that you like to try and pursue. And it's difficult to apply for that role not knowing what it is.
Sure.
And basically, syempre, if you're college fresh grad and you're applying for your first job, you want it to be something that you like. So try to establish first and see if you have questions on what the role really entails. And you can reach out to me if you like to know more din naman. And I think that's it kasi once you decide na this is something that you want to try, you can just go out and apply. I think there are a lot of openings naman for institutional trading, especially for fresh grads. I think the barrier is low. Kasi this is it's hindi rin there's not a lot of experienced people now in the market. If you have experience, you'll be pirating and jumping from one firm to another. And if you jump from one firm to another, the other firm will have an opening. So parang you need new people coming into the industry, and that's how the industry is currently, I think from my view, that's how it's shaped on a manpower perspective. So if you're able to, decide that you like this role or like this kind of career, then just go for it. Just check first kung ano yung... Actually, you can go on interviews naman and ask them. You don't need to... Pero you can do that then.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, sir. So Sir Perry, thank you so much for your answers, and for the audience, thank you so much for the questions. I think that ends our Q&A. Miss Precious, if you can take the lead now from here.
Thank you, Mr. Perry Ang and Mr. Emmanuel Bertodazzo Jr. As our token of appreciation, we present to you the e-certificates. CFA Society Philippines presents this certificate of recognition to Mr. Perry Irvin Ang, CFA, for his valuable contribution as the speaker on the topic of a primer on the investment process, from strategy to execution, at the Philippine Junior Finance and Investment Summit 2024, Chart the Future, Unlocking Opportunities for Tomorrow, given this the 27th day of September 2024. Signed by Mr. John B. Balsen, CFA, the President and Chairman of the Board of the CFA Society Philippines. Also, we present the Certificate of Recognition to Mr. Emmanuel Bertodazzo Jr., CFA, for his valuable contribution as the moderator on the topic of a primer on the investment process from strategy to execution at the Philippine Junior Finance and Investment Summit 2024. Chart the Future, Unlocking Opportunities for Tomorrow. And that's a wrap for the trader career track. Now, may we please call on again the speaker and our moderator for a quick photo op. 1, 2, 3. Again, our sincerest appreciation for your time and effort for being here today, Mr. Perry Ang and Mr. Emmanuel Bertodazzo Jr. God bless and keep safe. And that's a wrap for the trader career track. I hope you're all feeling inspired and excited about this career path. It's full of incredible opportunities. Now we're going to take a quick 10-minute break to recharge. Use this time to grab a snack, stretch, and reflect on all the insights you've gained today. After the break, we'll be heading back to the plenary session for more engaging content that you don't want to miss. We have 2 more fantastic sessions this afternoon. Reading the markets, must-watch indicators, and LinkedIn Rock Your Profile. Both are designed to provide you with valuable insights and tools to elevate your career. So, don't go too far. You can now leave this meeting room and re-enter the main webinar. If you're looking for the link, it's the same one sent to your email. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you back in a few minutes.